Can we jump to the start of the next paragraph?
Yep, I've been waiting for this.
My favorite sentences in the entire paper. Like the Inquisition, the Crusades also were a mixed bag.
A mixed bag of what? What's in this
what
bag?
What are some other mixed bags that we've heard about?
Neurosis, narcissism.
Vietnam, a mixed bag.
Yeah.
The War on Terror, a mixed bag.
A mixed bag of dead bodies.
Yes, a lot of people died, but, Halliburton made a lot of money, and that's American jobs. Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian, a special solo episode that I think you're going to love. I'm Casey.
I'm Sam.
I'm Jeremiah.
And today we're going to be, so the way this came about was we have a Discord. If you're not in the Discord, we don't talk about it enough. We really should plug it every episode.
Yeah, we don't hype it very much. Also, I think I need to re-up the links somewhere on our social media. So yeah, I'll store that up here.
We have a Discord if you can find it. And
you can DM us for the link if you want. If I don't have it up and it's not available, just shoot us a message on Instagram and we'll send it to you.
We got a pretty good crew of people in the Discord nowadays. I don't know exactly how many people are in there, but it's a decent amount. And that is a lot of times our friends in the Discord are where we get some ideas for things or stuff that we talk about during intros and stuff. One of our friends in Discord posted this article probably a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and it's called, "Is the Church Really to Blame? Shedding Light on the Dark Ages." And it's by a guy named Dr. Ryan McPherson, and this was in a Lutheran publication. What's the name of this thing?
The Lutheran Sentinel. A publication.
And it's conservative, very conservative. Yeah. Lutherans can go in many different directions. We might have some Lutherans that listen that are on the progressive side of Christianity, but they also, like every iteration of Christianity, can have their fun little, they put the fun in fundamentalist, when they want to.
Yeah. It's, I read this article and I was just like jaw on the floor and laughing the entire time. It's magic, and you really need to read it for yourself. But we're going to go through it and talk a little bit about it.
To kick it, so the Inquisition was a time, it was in the 12th century was when I guess the church, who was basically the state, had all the power.
Church.
Yeah. And they would basically, inquisitors would show up into towns, they'd announce themselves as inquisitors, and they would tell people to admit that they were heretics, or they'd be punished. And if they admitted that they were heretics, their punishment was it was kind of between a pilgrimage of sorts. I don't really know what that means. I pulled some of this from Wikipedia, and I didn't dive too deep into it, or a whipping. Everyone knows what a whipping is. Super fun in the right context, right? This wasn't the right context for that. So the people who I've never experimented
the
with
Inquisition, not the right context for whipping.
But the people who did it, who were accused but didn't confess, were basically subjected to inescapable torture and eventual execution. Lots of false accusations around this.
Yeah, some of them were maybe 1,000 people, right? Is it really that many people that were executed?
Well, overall, that is something we're going to get into for sure. But this one kind of touches on the Inquisition and the Crusades, which I feel like the Inquisition was like it was like a home front crusade. You're trying to root out nefarious Islamic or Jewish sects that are pretending to be Christians within your body of citizens.
Yeah, this was it's often played as by some of these apologists, as we'll get into, as fighting Islam, right? Oh, the Islamic State, whatever. I don't know how unified it was, but basically it took over a large portion of Europe, and they were
unified.
Yeah. Like, we need to get this back. And it started out there, but it was also in continuation with what we've seen throughout all of history. They also hated Jewish people and did a lot to kill them. It's pretty interesting how continually throughout history, the Jewish people have just been beat the fuck down. It does
make you wonder, like, I'm sure there are people who are educated on this, not me, but at what point did the church change from the Jewish people to like enough non-Jewish people they were able to turn and look and go, wait a second, where'd you guys come from? Like, I don't know.
It was fairly early on. I believe it was within like the first, like, ultimately, if you really want to kind of break it down, the New Testament's dealing with that. People trying to maintain their Jewish identity and some people not being that, and then trying to sway people one way or the other, say that it's cool to do both. I don't know. That's kind of what even the New Testament was dealing with, but I feel like that like partition was kind of in full swing by like at least the 4th century.
And I think,
don't quote me on that.
So, and like what you'll see it in the article here, in our post war on terror world, it's still
the only justifiable war, if you ask me.
Yeah.
If you want to get into just war theory, of course.
I feel like in very conservative circles, political and religious circles, it's still kind of okay to hate Islamic populations, to hate Muslims, right? But it's not okay to hate Jews until you get really far into the conspiracy theory realm. That's always where you know you've hit the turning back point. Like, even if it's entertaining, when you hit the point where they start talking about Zionists, that's when it's time to turn around and come back to the paved roads.
The anti-Semitic point of no return on the conspiracy theorists.
But I think like it's worth noting before we get into this that the way that I think conservative America views Islam and Muslim communities now is not at all what we're talking about in like the 10th, 11th, 12th century. The Islamic community at that point was kind of like the scientific center of the world. Like, that was the intellectual tip of the spear at the time. And, there was also like wars of conquest are one of those things that I feel like every population has engaged in pretty much. And it's always a travesty for the people who are being conquered. And it's always a proud, feat of accomplishment for the population doing the conquering. But I think that's where, when we get into the Crusades and stuff, there's going to be some really interesting language that is definitely skewed towards modern day ideas of Islam and stuff like that when they start talking about, Muslim rulers and Ottomans and things like that, like oppressing them and conquering their communities and whatnot.
Yeah, they almost try to delineate between conquering Christianity and conquering Islam, as though because their roots come from that the Christianity one was purely like a self-defense thing and just taking back what had been stolen from them, even though, they had through not exactly the most ethical means reached their power out across all of Europe through, the papacy. But it's definitely portrayed as like this, we were the good guys and we just default had all this control over everything for probably only good reasons. And then the nasty Islams came in and tried to and took over a third of Europe. And
through evangelism. We didn't conquer these communities. We converted them through evangelism. Yeah. They saw the truth of the Lord.
And ironically, that's like one of the big hangups they have is with Islam doing forced conversions and shit. And it's just like, you're talking about the Inquisition. That was forced conversion through and through. And they're like, but it was different. And then they kind of come up with some really shitty reasons why that I guess we can just kind of start poking through this article.
Yeah, I feel like we've been dancing around it. Like, this writing is so terrible that like you don't want to delay it all. I thought a lot of times while I'm reading this, just some of the sentences, like whether or not you agree with what they're saying, even if what you agree with, like if you agree with it 100%, it's hard not to read this and be like, man, this is just really poorly written. Like, it must really stink to be an intellectual and an academic, and that's your whole job, and you write articles like this.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're not peer reviewed. So,
well, let me kick us off here. I'll just get us into the opening. So the article written by Dr. Brian McPherson. What's that?
No, the article. I'm just saying it comes out swinging. Sentence 1 and 2 is already a mess.
Well, it's called "Is the Church Really to Blame? Shedding Light on the Dark Ages." The Inquisition, the Crusades, the stifling of science. Christianity often gets a bad rap when it comes to the Middle Ages. But what does history actually reveal about the influence of Christianity upon Western civilization? So this is a quest
setup
for knowledge. This is a let's look at the history. Let's look at the history, guys, and just see what it has to say.
Well, it's already not clear from the beginning. What is this article actually going to be about? Because they cover so the title is the church really to blame? Like, let's get to the truth about the Dark Ages. And then they throw science in almost immediately of what's the church's issue with science? Does the church really have a problem? And what about Christianity's influence upon Western civilization? Like, I don't feel like those are 3 different topics. And
this is a 1,200 word article.
Yeah,
that tackles the Inquisition, the Crusades, and the stifling of science.
And communism. There's also communism in there.
Oh yeah. Can you really write? Can you really be a good Christian and write an article about empire without giving a nod to communism, though?
No, as we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. So just stop me when I get into here, as far as I should. All right. Okay. The Inquisition was rare and unusual, not characteristic of the church as a whole.
Okay,
rare
I feel like a helpful
200 years.
We made it one sentence.
Okay, so we didn't really plan how we were going to go through this. I feel like a tactic you can use while we're going through this is just rephrase it in modern terms and then see if it's not the dumbest thing that you've ever heard. Nuclear war, rare and unusual, not characteristic of American military might as a whole. That's how you know you're really starting a good article here.
I want to say I did some other, not real research like any true academic, but some, Googling and Wikipediaing, and I found some stuff on the History Channel, and, so it lasted about 250 years. And for it to be rare, it probably needs to take up less than 12.5% of Christian history.
It needs to be less than a tithe of Christian history.
Yeah,
I do like that analogy.
I'm comfortable with 7% is. I'm comfortable with that being maybe rare, but 12.5% of Christian history, it's hard to call that rare.
The Tuskegee Project was rare and unusual, not characteristic of American race relations.
Yeah.
Well, that part's not true.
Okay. All right. We ready?
Yeah.
We ready to proceed?
Yeah, I got some thoughts in the next section. Let's go.
Okay. It actually was an improvement upon prior standards of justice.
All right.
That's the whole sentence.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Inquisitors.
Let's do the next few.
Inquisitors announced formal charges, sought the testimony of witnesses, and asked defendants to supply evidence of their innocence.
All of which weren't seriously considered.
All paving the way for modern judicial systems.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, modern judicial.
Are we about to talk about Roman law? Well, I wasn't going to go modern. I was going to go back to, I'm sorry, they think this started in the Dark Ages and paved the way for modern judicial systems, not like Roman law, whose words we still use in our judicial system. We literally haven't even updated it. We're still talking about jurisprudence and stuff. Sure, the church, they created the modern judicial system. Also, okay, so you roll up into a town. I don't know a lot of details. Like the rest of you, I mostly used Wikipedia for this. You roll up into a town, you announce the Inquisition. All right, so you're telling everybody we're here to judge you based on your supposed heresy or faith, and then your punishment will range from a maybe fun whipping to execution, somewhere along that span. So then we seek the testimony of witnesses, like, hey, we think this person's a heretic. Does anyone in this town that's scared of us want to vouch that they are a heretic? Nothing bad will happen to you. And then ask defendants to supply evidence of their innocence. What does that mean? Like their written works?
That was the one that I just cued in on. Yeah. I just read that and I'm like, oh, that's a gem. I missed that earlier.
Like when we ask witches to supply evidence, the evidence we're looking for is, do you float or do you sink?
Yeah. When it's a guilty until proven innocent system, and the evidence is that, that doesn't make sense. Like, there is no evidence that can save you in a situation like that.
What would the evidence be? Like, are you paying your tithe to the local church? Like, it was the Catholic Church. I'm guessing that factored in.
If she weighs the same as a duck, then that means she's made of wood.
Well, don't forget the part where they also reach out for eyewitness testimony. No one's gonna. Historically, eyewitness testimony has been the most reliable form of evidence a court of law has ever seen. Right? Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in modern times, we will supply you an attorney if you can't afford one. Back in the Inquisition, they supplied you a Judas cradle. You know what a Judas cradle is?
No.
It's a big pyramid-shaped spike that you sit on, and it helps you think of reasons why you sit on it. I
like how we all just shifted our seat a little bit.
Yeah, we did. That. It's like, did your dad ever do? Did you ever play that game Whistle or Lose It?
Nope.
No.
What game were you playing with your dad called Whistle and Lose It, Casey?
It was a terrible game. So okay. I don't know if anybody else's dad did this, but my dad would he would grab my nipple and he'd be like, whistle or lose it. And you had to whistle before he twisted it and he would stop. But under pressure, you couldn't whistle. So you'd just be like,
nope, never played that.
But I see the similarity here.
It's the ancient equivalent or the modern equivalent of the Judas cradle.
Right. Like, you a heretic? No. Says who? What does this even mean?
Whistle or split your butthole.
Yeah, I can't read or write. What evidence am I supposed to give you? I work in a field all day.
What's particularly funny about him kind of going to bat for it paving the way for the judicial system is he goes on to say, Inquisition. Well, first he says something that's just a flat out lie. Inquisitors took their time, sometimes a decade before reaching a verdict. Maybe they tortured you for a decade before they came to a verdict, but it's not like it was this peaceful time for the people they were mulling it over on.
Also, what were they doing there in that time? Processing paperwork? Sending writers throughout the land to collect evidence of this person's heresy?
They were letting you sit for free on a Judas cradle.
Yeah, he found one or two weird examples of some guy who was forgotten about in a prison cell, and was they took 10 years to figure that one out, and then of course he ultimately was a heretic, so they killed him, but they didn't not take their time.
There was a situation where an angry parishioner accused a priest of being a secret Jew, and it took several years to convict him of being one and kill him.
So he goes on to say the medieval Inquisition was both more fair-minded and more transparent than the secret police of the 20th century communist regimes.
Which is how you know you're reading top tier Christian propaganda, is because in no way is anything in this entire article have anything to do with modern communist regimes, which I guess they really mean totalitarian regimes that are, have a system of government that's somewhat communist. But
right.
How did we make that left turn?
Well, because the KGB would just kind of show up to people's houses and do what the Inquisitors did, but for some reason it was worse because it was under communist rule.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I would rather talk to a medieval inquisitor than a Cambodian tribunal under Pol Pot.
Yeah,
and that's I will stand behind that. Yes,
I think you picked a good hill to die on.
Yeah,
that's a hot take. We'll allow it.
That one, that was definitely the sentence where I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun."
But this is what I love is that he's painting this pretty picture for it, right? And then he goes, "I'm going to finish reading it." This little paragraph here. It's a couple of sentences. He says, "Church authorities did not themselves execute convicts, but only recommended punishment to secular authorities. Admittedly, the system was far from perfect and sometimes quite horrific. For example, some confessions
admittedly, the
were
system was
forced.
far from perfect." Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's just one of those lines. It's like, that's not good writing. Like that was inappropriate for this point in the article. Admittedly, the torture we've just described, while not a communist regime, also not perfect.
That wasn't perfect. And sometimes, it was horrific.
And for example, some confessions were forced torture, were obtained through torture.
Torture forced, which is not a term.
Yeah.
I really like how it says church authorities did not themselves execute convicts, but only recommended punishment to secular authorities.
That's exactly why Jigsaw isn't on the hook for anything in the Saw movies, right? Because he didn't actually do the executing. Those other people making choices.
This is it's
based
funny,
on his recommendations.
the little bit of like reading that I did outside of this, like from other, because there's a bunch of, I didn't know that this was a whole line, but there's like there's a lot of articles defending the church's actions during the Crusades and the Inquisition, and why are you doing that? That's like when your conservative family member like says something, they'll defend Marjorie Taylor Greene for something that she said, and you're like, hey, I don't think you're in the same boat as this person. Like, you don't have to go to bat for her. Don't go to bat for her. Like, you're not that. I know you're not that.
Right. You can say we agree on a couple things.
And do that.
Yeah, but she's nuts. But we agree on like these three things. That both of those things can be true at the same time. It doesn't have to be all in.
Ultimately, what this means is, I know we're already seeing some of this, but we're 850-ish years removed from this, maybe less. But we are seeing trends towards like Holocaust denial and acting like that was as bad as it was. So it only makes sense that we would, get there. It's weird. We're getting there sooner with something more recent and like with something in recent history. And it's a direction people want to go when they're wrapping their identity up, I guess, because the Inquisition is
when you need
like,
it. You need it to be right. Because the church is an extension of God, and therefore it should be perfect, or at least just. So you need it to be different than what it's made out to be. This is all because it's a counterpoint that like an atheist will bring up in discussion. They're like, oh yeah, the church was really accepting and perfect during the Crusades, and like I do not understand this impulse to defend something like this, like. There's better defenses. Like there's better defenses than, well, it wasn't so bad. The better defense would just be to say like, hey, look, some of the rulers had political goals and stuff like that, and they used the church to make those goals happen. Right. That would be the defense. It was actually pretty decent. It's just misrepresented.
Right. It's a stronger case to me for why it's a bad idea for the church to become a political influence, to achieve political power. Like you see how it goes awry very clearly here. And I think you could make a solid case for that is what happens. And that's
which is funny because the very next lines, he says, there's a sobering reminder here that human zeal can so easily depart from the true love of God and true love for one's neighbors. Multiple times in the article, he seems to cover that same thing of like, hey, you can't judge the church or Christianity just based on the actions of some people, which is a perfectly fair point. But then he's saying that, but I don't know if he actually believes it, because then he feels the need, like you were saying, Casey, to defend this. Like he can't possibly hold his faith now if he's not defending this.
Yeah. He says that the faults were a deviation of Christian principles and not because of them. Which, sure, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't know how you read, things that Jesus said and have come to conclusions like maybe we should conquest in the name of God and kill people who think differently than us to preserve. I mean, I guess you have to sell it as a way of like the only way to preserve this message is through these means. Otherwise, it's going to go extinct, and you put the stakes of hell. We talk about this all the time in just youth group. You make the stakes high enough, and it makes kids act funny and do weird things. Here you're offering people indulgences to fight, and basically granting them salvation and saying that the only way that this is going, and you don't have other sources, right? You show up to your fucking church on Sunday and you're getting this one message, and this message is aligned with with the political forces because they're completely unified. And in fact, they're probably it's probably the state that's struggling for power against the church in most situations at this time. So like, if that's the only message you're getting, like this is an extinction level event that we're facing. Salvation will be available to nobody if we don't take these matters into our own hands. And I guess that's how you got.
It's the selling point
here. Yeah,
it's the selling point when in fact the motivations are the same as any conquering force. Yep. It's trade, it's populations and subjects and things like that. It's taxes. It's like all of the same motivations that have motivated every empire. But in this case, it was sold using Christianity and with total control of the Christian message.
It's they hate us for our freedom, but
they hate us because they ain't us. That timely tale as old as time.
They hate us for our freedom. What a great! I want to trade in my WWJD bracelet for like they hate us because of our freedom.
I mean, but that seriously, that worked though. Like that level of like the propaganda is super simple, and this propaganda was super simple. They're preaching it from the pulpit every Sunday, and it's the kingdom of heaven idea, and that the kingdom of heaven needs to be on earth as well as whatever their understanding of heaven was back then. And so the best thing you can do is help spread the kingdom of heaven across the whole world. Well, what specifically does that mean? And that's where it like starts getting a little complicated.
Yeah. Dude, I remember so when we went to Cornerstone in college, one of the nights they had like a big like Christian rock band night, like all the big like Christian butt rock bands. And so Skillet was the headliner, I think, which it was a great show. It was really fun. But Disciple was in there somewhere. And I really liked Disciple at the time. And I remember the lead singer, between one of the songs, he was talking about, just having a passion for Christ. And he's like, 1,000 years ago, there were a bunch of guys that were so passionate, so on fire for God, that they thought, man, we need to reclaim the Holy Land so that God can come back to earth and rule here on earth and blah, blah, blah. And they called that the Crusades. And I just, even at the time when I was fully bought in, I just remember thinking,
whoa,
I don't know if this is I don't know if that's the angle you want to take on the Crusades, dude.
Dude, that's crazy. He's an early adopter of this mentality. So respect there.
I don't understand. I don't feel like I ever heard about the Crusades as anything other than like, yeah, this is when the church like sponsored a war over like 1,000 years to go fight the Muslims over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't feel like it was ever portrayed as anything more positive than that.
No, I mean, I remember taking the class at Liberty where I got into it. I had to write about it too. I picked that as a topic for one of my papers. And there were, of course, several crusades that, like you said, lasted quite a while. But even that book that I had, the ones I was checking at the Liberty Library, were as the crusades went on, they were almost less. They were painted less and less like Christian. Not really. Like, I don't know. They had to like do a little bit more to entice people to get involved. I'm sure they had war fatigue at that point, but I read plenty about how towards the latter crusades, it was like I say we, like it's the US doing it, like, or Christians, and like I'm somehow a part of those crusaders, but the Christians would like, go in, try to conquer the Islamic states. And then it talked about the Muslims' treatment of prisoners of war versus the Christians. A lot of the Muslim leaders were known for the way that they treated prisoners of war well, which was unusual for that time, and definitely not something that was. It wasn't the way that the Christians were handling it. So, I even remember writing about that and learning about that when I was at Liberty, and so Liberty wasn't even trying to paint this picture that this was a purely defensive tactic and defensive move, and that it was justified in some way. And oh, they treated their prisoners of war really bad. We were the good guys. And like, we just, fed them 3 square meals a day. They didn't really try to like make any of that shit up or propagandize it or anything like that.
Can we jump to the start of the next paragraph?
Yep, I've been waiting for this.
My favorite sentences in the entire paper. Like the Inquisition, the Crusades also were a mixed bag.
A mixed bag of what? What's in this bag?
What are some other mixed bags that we've heard
about? Neurosis, narcissism.
Vietnam, a mixed bag.
Yeah.
The War on Terror, a mixed bag.
A mixed bag of dead bodies.
Yes, a lot of people died, but, Halliburton made a lot of money, and that's American jobs.
The economics of southern cotton plantations, a mixed bag.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely was portrayed. I swear that's still being portrayed that way. Well, not all slave owners beat their slaves. And so you got to give credit where credit's due, right?
If you heard the argument, I forget which old racist senator said this. I think it was somewhat recently, though. They said, like, slavery, if you think about it, was one of the earliest forms of Social Security.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's like the argument that's like, well, you wouldn't be in the best and freest country in the universe if it wasn't for you guys being forcibly brought over here and sold into servitude. So maybe you should be thankful for that.
Also, by what metrics specifically are we measuring the greatest, freest country? Like, specifically, is it like the number of American flag capes that Kid Rock wears?
Yeah.
In his music videos?
Or the number of American flag guitars that he uses.
Jeremiah, have you listened to the new Hardcore History episode about slavery?
No, I haven't. I only check to see if there's new Hardcore Histories like once every 6 months.
Well, that's about the right time schedule, but
okay.
Yeah, it's 5.5 hours long, and it's
Human Resources. That's the name.
Yeah, it's wild.
Nice. Okay, I'm excited.
All right.
Oh yeah. All right, go ahead.
No, I was gonna just carry on with a little more words from this article.
Let's do it. Yeah, I feel like I want to make more progress because there's just so many good lines. We got to get them all.
All right. In many ways, the Crusades were a defensive war against Islamic armies that already conquered 1/3 of Europe, disarmed the populace, limited their economic opportunities, and forbidden them from sharing the gospel beyond their own families. Often children were taken from them, enlisted in the Islamic army, and forced to fight against Christians. This is
like the biggest. We're only going to explain one half of this particular equation. Like, in many ways, the Crusades were a defensive war. We're not saying that we were just trading countries back and forth with like the nations of Islam for hundreds of years. No, like our part was a defensive war. We would never forbid them from sharing their gospel. We wouldn't do that, but they were doing that to us. And we would never take anyone and like press them into servitude if from a nation that we conquered, like they're doing to our children.
Right. Well, what's wild is they also paint this picture, maybe not so much right here. I think it comes up later, but how, they had taken the Holy Land back. I think we already touched on it a little bit, but it's like there is a irony to Christians, fighting over the holy, like that's, again, this is the anti-Semitism, right? Like Christians think that they have the right to that Holy Land at that time. So therefore they were willing to wage an entire war against another Abrahamic religion to have that. Now you can argue that Islam has more of they have much more of a case to make about why that they should have some of that or parts of that or the Holy Land in general, as opposed to Christians who have just displaced Jews since the beginning of time and acted like everything they have is theirs.
So he seems to understand that perspective as well, just in the most tone-deaf, logic-dumb way, because his next line is no follower of Christ, nor anyone appreciative of peace or justice, remember those words, should have been content with Islamic occupation. So if we wanted to reword that, no follower of Christ nor anyone appreciative of peace or justice should have been content with not violently driving out the other nations that live in the land that we think should be our land because of religious reasons. We love peace and justice, so we must drive them out of this land so we can have it.
But it's the same thing that it always comes back to when we're talking about like the US and law and you know, all of that stuff. It comes down to, what is your definition of being free to live as you want, you know? And I think for a lot of these people, you should be free to live as a good Christian, and that's it. And if whatever you want goes outside of the lines of that, then it's not, you know, it's not constitutional and it shouldn't be protected. And in fact, we need to protect everyone else against what you want to do.
Yeah. It's also notable that I lost my place here. Oh, yeah. You know, his problem is the occupation of Christians, but it is worth noting that, you know, their Christian story comes from an occupied Jew. So it's
almost like for all of human history, different humans have thought that they should have possession of land that other humans have for reasons. And there's always reasons, but it really comes down to, we would like to be on that land instead of the land that we're currently on. And we think it's wrong that you are.
Yeah. It's the same thing over and over again. It's, I don't know. This is just what humans do. Why are we trying to argue in favor of Christians from this?
Because we need to dupe the serfs. We need to dupe the serfs into being all for it. We can't just be like straight up of, we just want the land. Like,
what is funny too is that like he continually talks about like Islam and Islamic occupation and all of that kind of stuff. Doesn't really talk about the fact that they also like exterminated or ousted Jewish populations along the way. And that plays a big role in like the Spanish Inquisition. Was they forced like, I don't remember what it was, 200,000 Jews
200,000
out of Spain. And that never comes up in the article because, you know, it's anti-Semitism isn't totally cool within these circles. But
I think they cover it when they say they were a mixed bag. I feel like that includes, that encompasses.
They were part of that bag.
I misread that.
Like the next sentence that says, unfortunately, Christians' crusades against Islam also included instances of wanton violence plus an idolatrous preoccupation with holy relics. That war had some instances of wanton violence.
Yeah, it was like entirely revolved around wanton violence.
The war is honorable. The war is a crusade. The wanton violence is like, all right, well, you're not supposed to rape them once you conquer them. Like, you can conquer them, you can kill them, then you drive the women and children out of the land. You don't rape. Okay, you can rape some of them. We're allowed to do that. The rest you have to drive out of the land. Like,
of all the things that he could call out about the Crusades, he's like, an idolatrous preoccupation with holy relics. Like, that's what he found fault with enough to talk about in this article. It's like, they really wanted these doodads and trinkets.
The Shroud of Turin. What can you do without the Shroud of Turin?
I don't know. Isn't that what you wished for if you could have any single object?
That's what I ask for Christmas every year.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like in one episode we had like if you could ask for any particular item from all of human history, what would you ask for? And you said the Shroud of Turin, and I said I want a sword.
I don't remember that at all. That's funny.
I really want a lightsaber, but I will settle for a sword.
I do really appreciate the way he closes out this paragraph because it's important. Because we know as Christians, what's the number one most important thing to do as Christians? You guys not going to answer?
Being a patriot, spread the gospel.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I didn't know if this was a joke question or
no,
like you're actually asking.
So he goes, This is a good reminder that not everything done in the name of Christianity is right. But at the same time, we should avoid the opposite extreme of supposing that there was nothing good about the Crusades. Codes of chivalry promoted honorable leadership. Islamic imperialism was repelled
by Christian imperialism.
And the gospel again could be preached without political restraint. I think
unless you were part of the Inquisition that was also going on.
And he's missing the part where it's like, okay, what gospel? Like, what they're walking around trying to go gotcha to heretics and then killing them. Like, there's no
they
traditional.
They show up at the gates of the city. Then they walk the leaders of the Islamic city through the Romans road. Okay. Just like we learned it in our middle school Bibles class. They walk them through the Romans road. They ask them like who, if you died tonight, where would you go? And then they ask everyone to like raise their hand, come to the front of the city. And only if that didn't work out did they raise the city. Like they started with an altar call, but some people's hearts were hard. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you?
I love that idea. Just like standing outside playing Just As I Am for 3 hours. And when nobody comes out and like and confesses their sins and stuff, they're like, all right, fire the trebuchets. You guys asked for it.
There's this little bit from this. So just getting into their crusades being merely defensive and them skirting over the fact that they had booted 200,000 Jews out of Paris, right?
Well, it's their fault for still being Jews because, the New Testament fulfilled the Old Testament. So all of the Jews. Oh, you mean the actual people group? Never mind.
Yeah,
okay.
hence supersessionism. So they were called, they called them conversos, which I thought was kind of funny. It's in the little piece here from something I pulled from the History Channel that I thought was interesting.
That was Jews that had converted to Christianity, right? By force, basically.
Yeah. Maybe not always entirely by force, though.
Sure.
But there became a level of skepticism about them because there's always that panic over. For some reason, there's always some panic about the Jewish people within Christianity. So this piece from the History Channel says, in the late 15th century, King Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella of Spain believed corruption in the Spanish Catholic Church was caused by Jews who, to survive centuries of anti-Semitism, converted to Christianity. Known as conversos, they were viewed with suspicion by old, powerful Christian families. These guys can't win. Conversos were blamed for a plague and accused of poisoning people's water and abducting Christian boys. I mean, now
had the same like conspiracy theories about Jews.
Back to like Hitler
pogroms over and over again.
Yeah. Ferdinand and Isabella feared that even trusted conversos were secretly practicing their old religion. Like, what level of fucking delusionoid paranoia do you have to like constantly be wondering if they're practicing their old religion and be that butthurt by it? Like, the Jews are the one people who have never, well, maybe, excluding a lot of the Old Testament, but since, everyone fucked them over, haven't done a whole lot to try to fight for anything back. Since the royal couple,
this sounds like some Crusades apologism here.
Yeah.
Except for the Old Testament, when have Jews ever gone to fight anybody?
Well, I mean, they chronicle their conquests or lack thereof.
What about Israel? Are we the nation
I
of
think
Israel?
you want to be careful on that point, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's still the same argument that most people in the conservative church still fall for is the nation of Israel and the Jewish people from the Old Testament that you're supposed to care about if you're a good Christian. Like, they equate the two like they're automatically the same thing, even though many Jews think that like nothing could be further from the truth. But
yeah, I think I'm maybe misrepresenting myself here.
No, I think I understand what you're saying. We're just jumping on it, making
okay.
Don't scare me on the cancel button.
Yeah, I'm scared of that cancel button.
I think this next paragraph, we take a hard left turn or hard right turn, actually. As for science,
alt-right, some might say.
now we were just talking about like the gospel can now be preached without political restraint. End of that thought. Next thought.
Unless, of course, your version of the gospel didn't fit in with theirs.
The implication.
Caveats, man. Caveats.
The real gospel, obviously, the true Scotsman. All right. So as for science, the standard jab against the church is demonstrably false. So basically, he said, I have the documents right in front of me.
I got the documents right here.
Church leaders sponsored the building of astronomical observatories. Christian intellectuals developed the world's first universities in which the old ideas of Aristotle and the newer ideas of what we call the Middle Ages were freely debated. The slave owners, they had to provide shelter and food for their slaves, okay? Oh, sorry. That just ended
Benjamin Franklin was a Christian. And so what if he went to violent orgies?
It's just, he just takes that turn into throwing out these things like, you can't say that the church doesn't like science. We built an astronomical observatory during a time where we really didn't know anything about the stars. Like, Christian intellectuals developed the world's first universities. Again, I don't think that's true. I feel like there's some ancient civilizations in the BCE time zone that, you know, might have had some different thoughts about that. Like, they make it sound like, well, I guess in their version of history, this is true. In the time of like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and everything, this is basically where all of our modern ideas about higher education and philosophy and apparently our judicial system and whatever just sprang into existence, because that's maybe the time the modern church started forming itself out of like the bones of like, you know, late medieval Catholicism.
Yeah. Well, in a time when to say that you weren't a Christian was to be ostracized from society, many proclaimed Christians invented nice things.
Yeah, well, I mean, even like I mean, it was a slight culture shock for me, even moving to Virginia for school, where everyone's just like, everyone I had met everywhere at Kroger, in line at CVS, they were all Christians, everyone. That was my first experience with like being in a culture that was saturated in that way. Right. And it wasn't really worth it for a lot of people to go against that grain. Even though you could tell that there were plenty of people where it was just a cultural identity and it didn't mean much outside of that. Which was
true back then.
Talked about
like,
yes, that's what I'm saying.
True.
It's like, that's still a thing. There's still maybe, I mean, of course there are some maybe variances, but I mean, I still found that strange. I mean, that's the Bible Belt. That's what a lot of people have a hard time being in that area, where it's very culturally Christian after they've shifted out of that mindset.
When the Bishop of Paris condemned 219 statements from Aristotle's work in 1277, this is good. The result was not so much censorship as freedom. University faculty and students now had space to develop alternatives to Aristotle's ideas about physics and astronomy.
Oh my God. State-sanctioned ideas.
The thing about freedom is chains, okay? What you need to do is free yourself.
Certainly not free.
You have to free yourself and give yourself space to develop alternatives to the facts, because if you develop alternatives to them, that's really freedom, is rejecting the evidence over here so you can substitute something different that is the different thing that we think is a good thing.
Well, yeah, and call me a knuckle dragger here, but like, what was the difference in timing between 1277 and when was Aristotle active? When was he alive?
I'm going to look that up. That's a good question. I thought it was way before then. Born 384 BC, died 322 BC.
So 900, they're basically declaring that pieces of a 900-year-old idea are wrong and can't be studied. Because I mean, that's basically what it is when the bishop condemned those 219 statements. It basically means that they're not allowed to be taught, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not allowed to be included in the bubble of things as acceptable cultural Catholicism. You know, you can only be with us if you don't think these things are true publicly. So when faculty and students had space to develop alternatives, do you think that means they now had to develop alternatives because they couldn't talk about the other stuff? Like, they didn't have space to do new thought. They had to cut out all of this other information and then come up with something that couldn't have space for that thing in it. Yeah.
You were forced to replace it at that point. I mean, it's like, I'm blanking on a current comparison that you could make, but if you're like all the panic around critical race theory, which is not a defined curriculum, nor is it taught in schools. It's like people are calling anything that is related to talking about race in school, they're just blanket statement calling it critical race theory and trying to put a ban on it. So that's one of those things where it will then, I guess, force people to come up with more creative ways and nuanced ways to dig into things that should be talked about, even though they're barring you from using language and research that's previously been done.
So then the article gets to some more of the whole, like, did anything good ever happen before about 1200 when the church started really kicking it into high gear? So they say, in the late Middle Ages, universities cultivated a form of debate called the disputation that required the presenter to make a fair-minded presentation of both sides and then provide clear reasons why he favored one view over the other. Again, that feels like, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, plenty of other cultures. Like, you guys think you're the ones who came up with debate?
This
like
has been
both sides presenting an argument.
That's even been practiced in Judaism for quite a long time. Like, where, because the Jews are less monolithic in their beliefs. Not necessarily always, but Christianity, you go to church and you have a guy say, "This is the truth. I'm telling you the way that it is. Other people are wrong, and if they're not wrong about these things that are deal breakers, then you're still in. You're just not. You're just a little bit wrong, and we'll hang out outside of this." But rabbis I don't know if it's always, but you can even still see this if you want to go back to the New Testament and the Gospels, where it's like there was debate about the religion within the temple. Like, Jesus showed up for that and would have those discourses. That, like, Jesus wasn't like bringing this brand new thing to the table. This is something that people have been doing. He might have brought new ideas or looked at things differently, but that conversation, those debates have been carrying on forever because the Levitical law wasn't particularly well defined. So half of their time, rabbis, Pharisees, Sadducees, they would all just converse about what these things meant and how to apply them to our lives. And I just think that's notable, like that still today, that tradition does carry on in a lot of ways, where a rabbi will be like, this is one way to look at this 3,000-year-old passage, and then this is a way that other people have looked at it, and they might tell you which one they prefer. But it's like, to act like that's unique to Christianity is so ridiculous.
Well, when they were talking about Aristotle and condemning the statements, some of his statements in 1277, then they go on to say, but they preserved Aristotle's logical way of thinking, as did Martin Luther and Philip whoever during the 1500s. It's like this continued tactic that he uses where he downplays the negative aspect of what the church did and then immediately takes credit for something that the church had nothing to do with,
right? Like that was the outcome that happened to have had this outcome. Therefore, the church is credited with it.
Yeah, and like saying universities cultivated a form of debate called the disputation, like saying that universities cultivated that form of debate doesn't mean that the church was responsible for it. Like, I have a pretty good feeling the church was still issuing edicts on every single aspect of life and trying to force people to abide by those rulings. It's almost as if, this is what humans do when they're not forced by a totalitarian government or church to accept certain things as fact, no matter what.
Well,
people
then he dives into
and they talk about it.
Then he dives into throwing out just the buzzwords that you'd expect, right? Where they're just the dog whistles at that. It's like he says disputations fostered greater intellectual honesty and greater academic freedom than today's universities, where speech codes and political correctness stifle true debate.
Yeah, what true debate is being stifled at modern universities?
You can't debate whether or not there were, there were some good things about slavery. Like, I don't know exactly. We keep going in the slavery direction.
Some college kid threw a milkshake at Ben Shapiro, and that is indicative of all children in colleges.
Yeah.
Some of these universities don't want a 35-year-old who's skilled in the art of debate to come and try to trip up a bunch of teenagers and rip into them for the sake of his YouTube channel because they're scared of us.
Yeah. Well, and even just using the words speech codes and political correctness to stifle true debate. There's this misunderstanding on this person's side of the aisle that not entertaining ridiculous untruths and talking about them is the same as stifling debate.
Yeah.
I think there's a middle ground here, because there are situations where I feel like that policing goes way too far. Mm-hmm. And I still think, I mean, people should be able to talk about their ideas and discuss them and stuff like that, but not wanting to have someone speak at your college about flat earth or something like that is not the same as stifling their views.
Right.
And the free market of ideas, like the free market of ideas can tell you your ideas suck or are loathsome and they don't want to talk about them. Like, it doesn't mean your debate is being stifled so much as maybe you hold a fringe view and it's being treated like that.
Yeah. Well, of course, the flip side of that is when fringe views take hold that do cause problems. You have to figure out, like,
right. But I'm just saying, it's not like if you have a lot of people like aggressively pushing back on you for something that you want to discuss, it's possible this isn't a 50-50 situation. Like, this may not be I've got my perspective and you just have your perspective. It could be there's the common perspective that almost everyone thinks, and then you're a dick and you think something terrible.
Right. Yeah. Because it also to act like academic institutions owe it to their student body to have debates or conversations around things that don't really fit into the world of academia. And I think, like, okay, like, what's a good example? That's not, there all these, every example ends up being politically charged. But I don't think that's necessarily the academia's fault. But even take, global warming. It's just like, the debate around that now is that whether or not people are responsible for it. Like, it doesn't seem like anyone's denying that it's happening. They're now.
Oh no, people definitely are, but it's less mainstream to deny that. It is more mainstream to be like, well, do we really know? Is it cyclical, or did humans cause it, or it's the wringing our hands of, well, whose fault might it be? Because then we don't have to do anything.
Right. But so what I'm getting at is, in an academic institution where, you focus on data and empirical evidence, is it worth having a conversation or about whether or not we've done things, humanity has done things to cause global warming? Like, do you want to, you could go to an academic institution that might go that way, like Liberty for sure. And you can choose to go there and you can have those beliefs, but I don't think it's I think what this guy's using, when he's using the language around stifling free speech, that's just not the same as an academic institution saying, it's not worth our time in the sense of fairness to host a debate between someone who has an idea that's empirically considered false and then what the evidence.
Right. Because also when you present two ideas for debate, you are in essence saying that these are two things that should be equally considered by everybody. And in a lot of these cases, they just aren't.
Even if it's not equal, it could be like,
it just depends on who's if the college has someone coming there to speak who's a firebrand or whatever else, and this, a small group of students shut down the campus to keep the guy from speaking. Like, I think that's ridiculous, but like a campus being approached by Millionopolis about, making a stop on his book tour. And they're like, nah, I'm good. We don't want to host that here.
Right.
That's a different situation. It just all depends. Like, what is the group of people that are supporting the institution want out of this? And if they don't want it there, then don't have it.
Yeah, I do feel like we're in this period of time. I guess we've always been here. It's not new. I think it's easier to access information, or that is probably incorrect. But, we're sitting here talking about the Inquisition, where people like us, lay people, just show up to church on Sunday. You were born and raised into this thing, and you hear this. You get that narrative passed down to you. We look back on it now and know that it was emphatically false, incredibly wrong, and really fucked up. But most of the people in that situation didn't know. So I don't want to be the whole, do the whole chronological snobbery thing and act like this is a new problem that people haven't dealt with before. People have basically been at the mercy of the institutions that hand out information. So obviously there are mostly plus sides to being in the age of information, even if it makes bad information equally as accessible.
This is something that Sam and I have gone around and around with.
We talk about this
times.
all the time, off air,
because he's like, "What if it's completely false and demonstrably false, and there's every evidence saying that it is false? Then it shouldn't be allowed to be around." And my view is that you can't prove that it's completely false to people who believe it, and you can't combat those ideas by just not letting anyone say them or publish them or anything else.
I'm going to push back on that because there is reasonable.
It's working out really well so far. Let's just say that.
I mean, there's been studies done on, and I'll find them and I'll share them and I will post it in the Discord and we can talk.
And I will disregard them.
Because when it comes to like vaccine,
this meme from my extreme memes to convert non-patriots page on Facebook that's not run by a Russian bot farm gave me a meme that I feel like really unseats all this research that you just posted that I will not read because I do not understand.
Save your breath. I've already decided. How's that?
I've already seen a summary of this article in a video on band.news. I don't need to read it.
BitChute. That's the new one.
Is that one
BitChute?
No. Is it like Substack?
I don't know what it is. I keep getting articles sent to me on BitChute, and there are always.
It sounds like BitChute.
Always a lot.
That's what I heard.
Friends, I know a lot of you out there are small business owners. I know a few of you are musicians or artists. Regardless of which camp you fall into, eventually you're going to want to put out some custom merchandise. But the prospect of getting a design together and going through one of these impersonal, large-scale websites can be intimidating and tedious. And that's why we're proud to be sponsored by Minor Threads. Minor Threads is a North Texas-based custom printing company that is able to help you get your logo, your company's branding information, your design onto almost anything.
Maybe you want to order some shirts, some stickers, banners, maybe enamel pins. The merch game's crazy these days. Minor Threads can help you with all sorts of promotional products. They also specialize in custom printing with low minimums. That can be great if you're a small company just looking to put in a small order. And for our environmentally friendly friends out there, they have plenty of eco-friendly options as well.
So if you're ready to take that step and get some merchandise, go to minorthreadsco.com and request a quote. Mention this ad and you get up to 15% off custom print orders over $100. 15%. So again, go to minorthreadsco.com and tell them your boys at Grown Up Christian sent you.
I feel like the next paragraph is maybe a wash, but there's some good stuff coming up if we want to keep going.
Yes, we can skip over some of this. You know, he says like a little bit more of what we talk.
But the propaganda really kicks back up in the third to last paragraph. I think that's
So is the church necessarily hostile to science? Certainly not. Don't be ridiculous.
Again, I don't think this is how this article started out. Like, we started out with, were the Crusades bad? And now we're on, does the church hate science?
Here's why you don't have to feel bad about anything.
Right, exactly.
Christianity teaches that God created the world and that God gave people eyes to see and minds to think. And that about covers it, right? Modern science was founded upon this doctrine of creation.
Okay.
When some scientists turn against their creator, promoting evolutionary theories, then of course tensions emerge. But that's not the fault of genuine science, nor the fault of biblical Christianity.
Out of curiosity, some scientists, is there like a number that gets you like a little bit closer to how many scientists some is? Is it more than 99%? Or less?
I would say the sum is about 98% of scientists have turned against God.
Okay. Gotcha.
It just leaves the 144,000 scientists who still believe in the water canopy.
So this tactic, all right. This tactic is fun because it's the answers in Genesis tactic, right? True science is science that it comes from a biased perspective of that, you know, there's a unmoved mover or some shit like that. It's like, but this is it's not just employed by organizations like Answers in Genesis when talking about why they're real, because people want to tell them they're not real scientists, and they get really offended by that, because of course everybody has some bias, but a lot of scientists, one set out to prove something wrong, not prove necessarily something right. There's probably an equal balance of that. And then also like there's obviously people who are tied to their ideas to the point where they're like set up experiments and they don't work, and they're like, I think this is true, so they do it again, it doesn't work. Eventually they're forced to abandon the idea due to failed experiments. But I think what's fun about something like the Answers in Genesis approach, which is we start from the premise that of course what we believe is true, and we will never abandon that belief, and anything that doesn't fit into it is clearly just doing science wrong. And Christianity employs these tactics throughout this whole system. Like I was in it with some people on Twitter recently. Just, I guess I was bored enough to quip back and forth a little bit. But it was, constantly the responses were, you're not a real Christian because you don't believe X, Y, and Z, which is fine. Then I'm happy to not be a Christian by their standards. It doesn't bother me at all. But it's that same mentality of like, the real thing that this is only in the way that we understand it, and everything. And that you already mentioned,
it's
Jeremiah,
no true Scotsman.
Yeah. It's just doesn't work. It at some point something has to give, or I guess it doesn't, and you insulate yourself. And
he says exactly what should give in the next sentence. Christianity encourages science so long as scientists do not reject the creator.
Yeah.
We want you to learn everything you possibly can, as long as you look at it through this one lens.
Which was
anything you want.
All of our science education in middle and high school, right?
But he's trying to bring it home. Christianity supports the proper administration of justice, which sometimes, but certainly not always, occurred during the Inquisition. Again, we're back to like it was a mixed bag. The war crimes, mixed bag. Sure, a lot of families got gassed. However, there's no longer as big of a food shortage in Liberia because we bombed it. You're welcome. Like, I'm not saying it's the exact same mentality, but I feel like he's just desperately trying to land the plane.
Yeah.
Christianity recognizes that war may be waged justly in self-defense, which again, sometimes, but not always, was the case during the Crusades.
Oh my God.
Mixed bag. Christianity is also more than all these things.
He's a trail mix guy for sure. Just that mixed bag.
I really hate the last paragraph, and I want to talk about something specific I think it's doing in it. But
I guess this is what I was kind of trying to just get at too.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm curious if we're thinking the same thing.
Oh, okay. Well, let's read through it. Christianity should never be defined by whatever people who call themselves Christians happen to do, whether good or ill. Nor should Christianity be equated with virtuous living, though, of course, that is an expected fruit of faith. Christianity is founded not upon human actions, but rather upon the words and works of Jesus Christ, who died on the cross. You got to slip the gospel message in here to your parishioners who already believe this.
To the people who get this 18-page pamphlet from the Lutheran Sentinel, let's go ahead and get an altar call in.
To win forgiveness for all people, the gospel of redemption is the heart and soul of Christianity. Medieval hymns cherishing the gospel message illuminated people's hearts throughout the so-called Dark Ages. The same Bible-based lyrics enlighten us still today.
That's
okay.
What is that last line? Medieval hymns. What is he talking about?
He's trying to land the plane, and it goes way off. I have a really big issue with this whole paragraph, but I don't know. I feel like I can talk about this for a few minutes, so I can wait if I need to.
Oh,
go for it.
Go off, kid.
Okay. So I feel like this is like an excuse or a way of wimping out that Christians use a lot of the time when they're making arguments, not always about political things, but I think it happens a lot politically. The end of the argument or the end of their pitch, like of a pastor talking about, giving their pre-election sermon or whatever that they're going to do every year. They're not going to come out and just say, vote for this person, or at least up until, the last 5 years, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's always going to be shrouded in this whole like, well, here's what God teaches us about freedom, or here's what the Lord teaches us about democracy, or here's what the Bible has to say about, and they have to just force it through this Christian lens where they obfuscate the thing that everyone's thinking and everyone's just going to do anyway through, well, just do whatever the Lord leads you. And if that is to vote straight Republican, like we've been subtly reinforcing for the past 50 years, you should vote straight Republican, but use the excuse of, this is how the Lord leads me, or here's what we think God's candidate is. It just always happens to be the candidate from this one party. Like I don't think, this is not really a hot take, but I don't think people are really offended that people have sincere Christian beliefs a lot of the time. It's the things that they do or the ways that they hide behind those beliefs to try to camouflage to themselves and to everyone else the person that they actually are.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
If you're just going to vote mainline conservative Republican, no matter what, just say it. Like, don't hide it behind what does God want. You think he wants this one very specific thing, and you don't really care about anything, including his own words, that imply that that's not the case. Like, you think God is this conservative, capitalist, free market, like supply side economics Jesus, and anything that doesn't fit into that mold, you have to hide behind, like, well, as Christians, we just need to pray for whoever becomes president, who I sincerely hope is only one of the two parties every single time. Like, it's just own it. Like, you should be able to say, I have this sincere faith and these principles that I believe God has commanded us to live our lives by. And it disgusts me that the best option out of these two political parties is still terrible in all of these ways. However, I feel like I still need to vote for them because of these reasons. But so much of this is like spitting in the face of this faith that I hold so dear, that controls my whole destiny and all this other stuff. I can respect that, right? Like, I get it. That's somebody who actually has those beliefs and they're sticking to them while acknowledging that sometimes that leaves you with choices that you don't really like. Not just trying to whitewash those choices in like, well, this is the holy choice. Not like this is the least of two horrible choices that I believe aligns up 10% more. Like, I can respect those people. I just cannot respect this argument. This is just, it's wimping out.
Yeah. I mean, the whole, like, I don't know, like summing this entire article up with, you can't really judge Christianity by Christians' actions, and you can't equate being a Christian with living a perfect life, because, even if that is something that we all strive for. What is this article for?
Like, what's left after that?
Well, yeah, and like none of us.
Your conscience. If you were guilty, if you're one of the people who feels guilty about the Inquisition or the Crusades, congratulations, you don't have to. And anybody who complains about them or like says the church did these bad things, well, you have these really stupid arguments that you can regurgitate back at them. Like, well, you can't judge all Christians by the actions of the state church 800 years ago. Like, duh. Everyone understands that. You just don't want to have to consider the bad things in your own past because you're lumping it into this monolithic viewpoint.
Yeah. I just, it's so weird to like throw that point in after making excuses for some of the like worst points in the church's history. You can't judge all Christianity by the actions of Christians in the 1200s. Like, well, yeah, no, I mean, that is a logical point. And if somebody that you're talking to about Christianity just can't get over the fact that the Crusades happened, like, then just don't. Maybe there's no common ground between you and this person. Like, you don't have to whitewash the Crusades to still be a Christian and not feel bad about it. Like, you don't have to explain this away. Just say, yeah, I don't know, this is a dark period. I think it was people taking advantage of, using the authority granted to them through the church to do awful things that furthered their other ambitions. That's it. That's all anybody needs to hear. And it's done. It's over, like, if all of this comes down to you can't judge Christianity by the actions of Christians, then stop justifying the actions of Christians. Stop doing it. You do not need to apologize for people that lived, 1,000 years ago. So stop doing it. And I feel like that's where we are with so many things, where it's like, I can understand a lot of the people that I know are very conservative, Republican voting people, right? And that's fine. They're good people. They are good people. And that's most of the people I'm around. I don't want these people to defend Marjorie Taylor Greene or whoever else, whoever the worst actors are on that side. Disavow them. Just be like, yeah, I don't know what's going on over there. Here's what's important to me. I just want to, I want low taxes and, better business situations. So, whether or not that's the case or not, just as example, right? But this feeling of like you have to circle the wagons around one of your own when they're being insane is a stupid impulse that we need to get rid of.
Yeah. I think what I find annoying about his closing paragraph, is like what you said, in that you're saying you don't have to you can't base Christianity on the actions of some, but then you go through all these lengths to justify it. But there is I think that it's like that. I don't know if that impulse comes from because people aren't taking us seriously enough, or if the impulse comes from something like we were told and taught about sanctification. Is that something you are both still familiar with?
Not incredibly.
Put the pieces together for me, Daddy.
Okay. So it was like,
use that degree.
You become a Christian, and then over the process of your life, you are continually sanctified by God. You are supposedly going to be a better Christian. You are going to, the sinful ways of your past are going to shed, and it's a process, but that's why it's an ongoing process, and you never achieve perfection, but you are on the up and up. Your mind is being transformed to be more like Christ's. That doesn't play out in anyone I've ever met ever. I don't see that really much at all. And I think that's why people have this impulse to say, I'm not saying it doesn't. Of course, I got saved. I gave up drugs. I gave up alcohol. Now I do. But I can find plenty of shitty things about those people, and I don't want to be around them. And I won't, basing Christianity on like what they say or do, like that, that guest speaker that your church brings in. It's just like, don't tell me how much your mind has been transformed to be more like Christ, like that. And you can do that. You could do that in that setting, and you can align it with what people think it means to be a Christian, and you can confirm their bias that they're on the right track, and they can say in that in-group and that insular mindset. And that's what most churches are. It's also what mostly everything is. It's not just church. That mindset plagues everything, and it can be more wrong or right in certain places, but the impulse by people is generally the same, which is to be shitty to other people. And I don't see a difference in Christianity and things out of it. And I think that's why his impulse to say that you can't judge Christianity by other people's actions, but then try to make that justification, is because if this is true, if people's life, like, there should be an arc towards something bigger, better, more beautiful, more Christian, more Christ-like. And we don't see that arc in Christianity throughout history. It's just not there. If anything, it's a benign force. And I think for me personally, I'm okay with that. Like, so going back to this Twitter conversation, it's like, the whole thing got started because someone basically was wondering whether or not your faith or anything matters, like if it would change if Jesus didn't rise from the dead. I was like, no, it doesn't, because I don't have any intellectual belief or knowledge that he did. But I still call myself a Christian. So the pile-on was, you're not a Christian. You can't be a Christian if you deny. Well, what do you think? Do you deny the deity of Christ? It's just like, yeah, honestly, probably. I'm on the fence about that too. So it's like, you're not a Christian if you don't. And I get that. Like, that's fundamentally different than what historical Christianity says. And I know I'm going forever, but I'm going to wrap this up, because they're talking about Christianity as though it's like this, it became an established religion based on tenets, based on doctrine, and based on theology. But the word even started just because a bunch of people saw people acting a certain way, and those people all happened to say that they followed Christ. And what were they doing? Great things. Starting their own communities, taking care of each other, being there for each other. There was no established theology. There was honestly no real deification of Christ yet at that point. There was no necessarily a full-blown belief in his death, burial, and resurrection. That's what Paul was propagating at that time. But those communities established long before he wrote letters about it, a century after Jesus died. Well, 60 years, maybe 70 years or 40. I don't know. I forget. But either way, my point is that's what matters to me. It's like, is it why spend all this time and energy defending Christianity? Like if and harking on whether or not they fall into these right beliefs or wrong beliefs when you're saying when you know your religion started simply because of the way people acted, regardless of their belief.
I think almost everything comes down to like what does this mean for me? Like nobody's making big decisions about their religious affiliation or their worldview or their spiritual outlook because of what the group has done over the millennia. You know, nobody's making decisions about what they think about Christianity because of what the Christian church has done over the course of the last 100 years or 300 years or 2,000 years.
At least not in a positive way. That can only hurt you. It can't really help you.
Right.
But, you know, people are making these like, and that's what's funny to me about all of these kind of articles, whether we're talking about this or like the Gospel Coalition one that we talked about. Yeah. About like the 5 reasons that people, deconstruct. This is not written for someone who's not a Christian and they're struggling with the Crusades or the Inquisition, and that's what's holding them back from really committing themselves to Christianity. Like we buy into all of this stuff for somewhat selfish reasons. And I don't think that's totally bad, but like people are joining a church or adopting a worldview or whatever, because it's a plan for them. Like this is what's missing from my life. This is why this is all screwed up and this is all screwed up, is like, I need structure, I need principles, and this is going to help me through my personal problems. So, boom, I'm investing myself full force in it. And I feel like this whole segment of articles and stuff like that from different sects of the church, it's just like ideological masturbation. It's like, I want to feel like the church is good. Like I'm already committed and I'm a Christian and nothing you say could cause me to falter in my beliefs. But that's not enough for me. Like I need to feel like the church is a benevolent institution that only does good over time. And in order to do that, I need to fix some of these dark spots in the timeline. Like this is not written for the unbeliever who is trying to figure out what to think of the Crusades. Yeah. This is written for the person who like just wants further confirmation and certainty that like Christianity is the end, the beginning and the end, and it's everything and it's all right.
I even think that's maybe even a charitable interpretation. I think there's also a fear response in this. There's a reinforcement of, you're not crazy. Don't worry about it. You're not crazy. Like you can be okay with this thing. You can be bought into the system because that bad thing, that's not as bad as you think it is. Like that bad thing's okay. Don't worry about it. Like I think there's I think that's more than a little bit of this. It's stay the course. Don't listen to that thing over there that is making some points that seem like they're kind of making. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't criticize yourself. Don't really challenge your worldview. Like we'll throw up these critiques, which if all you've ever been is immersed in this belief system, maybe some of these critiques seem like they're like pretty cutting. Like maybe he thinks they're really throwing up an opposition to the Crusades and the Inquisition, saying this is what the other party believes. But we all heard that, right? Like how many creationist videos could you watch that presented the evolutionary argument in a way they're like, well, what idiot would ever believe that?
Right.
Well,
right.
You would be an idiot if you believed that version, but that's not the version that you'd actually get taught.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, those fear-based reactions are there. There's that, I need to stay the course. But again, I think it comes down to a lot of, if what I believe is true, if what I believe about Jesus is true and the way he changes lives and how good Jesus was, then how can you have to either say that you either make excuses for it or you say, well, those people weren't true Christians, or like you have to like you have to insulate yourself from that in some way to make it not have a real effect on you and your beliefs.
Which is working against the supposed goals of the church. I think people would have a lot fewer issues with them if they would just come out and be like, yeah, that stuff was bad. Yeah, the Christians who did that back then, they called themselves Christians, but we don't believe they were living by the tenets in the Bible, and they were wrong. Like, and we're trying to do better. Like, that's all we can say is we're trying to follow this book and the Lord we believe it contains, and we've gotten it wrong in the past, and all we can say is we're trying to do it right today. Like, people actually would respect that as long as it's not hurting other people. It's not that complicated, but everyone always falls back to the, no, I didn't. I didn't do it. It's not my fault.
I think it's a bit of a tough sell in some ways for people to do that, because then you have to call attention to your own life and allow people to see you juxtapose your life up against the tenets and teachings of Christianity and as well. Like, so if you're like, well, that wasn't great over there, but like, you know, what we're doing now is different. It's like, oh, what are you doing in your life then that makes this so magical and true? Like, how can it becomes something that they just generally experience and feel is true. And it doesn't often inform, it doesn't often inform your life in a way that makes you live it maybe differently than most people. I've noticed very little differences in people as a whole, from Christian to atheist to whatever religion you want. You go ahead and name it. Like, I would say that, like, based on percentages, they're all equal percent asshole. They're all equal percent trying. They're all
people are people.
Yeah. So what I think, and I haven't fleshed this out a bunch, but what I think, and when I think your religion and your faith becomes meaningful and important, or to the way I see it affect your life. Now, I have different standards than somebody else. You know, your alt-righter will say, I like the way that you live out your faith and the way that you showed up to the Capitol on January 5th because our democracy was at stake. But like, you can have someone who would say, to me, that action matters, and that shows me that you're a good Christian. Of course, I as a Christian will have a different belief. So you just kind of start like washing over words at that point. And I just continually find myself feeling like words and beliefs are all arbitrary. Like, your belief is like a mechanism. I think most people are building their belief system around the way they live and want to be in the world. I think that's what most people are doing. They're not allowing their belief system to challenge them in a meaningful way. They're co-opting a belief system to make them feel like they are part of the in-group. So if your belief system isn't challenging you to go outside of your box, your comfort zone, and go and extend yourself to take care of somebody else and put yourself out for it, then your belief system, it's probably not what you think it is. If it's Christianity, especially.
I think what's crazy about, I think these are such like human trends. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not specifically Christian or anything else. And it's funny to me to see things like mirrored in totally unrelated communities, but that have like the same vibe to them. You know, like, I think it's pretty universally held now that, like, saying, our thoughts and prayers are with you after something awful happens it's meaningless. It's dumb. Like, what are you talking about? You know, it doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't mean anything. And you've seen a lot of people do that kind of thing with like the war in Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, our thoughts and prayers. Like, Christian Nightmares posted a video this week. I think we shared it. We sent it back and forth to each other, but it was a young girl, and she was singing like this praise song to the people of Ukraine, and, asking them to look toward Jesus and he will deliver them and be there for them and stuff. And it's like, people are just like massacring this person in the comments and stuff. And rightfully so. It's ridiculous, right? It's a ridiculous thing to do. But then, like, I've seen so many people post like change their profile picture or, post like supportive messages, and they're like raising awareness about this and that and the other. And it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It doesn't have this like, millennia long ideological baggage attached to it, but it's like the same thing. Like, it's not doing anything same as singing a praise song about the people of Ukraine. I feel like they're human trends that like people just fall into, and it's more about you than it is about whatever group that you're like purporting to help or support or whatever.
I'm not sure. Like, I think it can be more about the people doing it. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know the motivations entirely that lie behind.
I guess it's different if you're trying to sell your religion to people who are fleeing a war zone. That is true. That's a different thing. That's a different thing.
And I always feel bad. I'm saying that I don't value people's belief systems, or I think everything they say is untrue, or that only actions express your belief. I don't think that's true. I think people act outside of what they say they believe frequently. I certainly do. I have an ideological belief, a belief system that's built on ideology and how I want to be. And then I have what I actually do. So I don't want to just like throw everyone under the bus or throw an entire religion under the bus, or religions. Like, I think that there's value in them. I think, but again, I think it comes down to how they challenge you. Or like when you look at Christianity and you read, even just like most people will just go to the Sermon on the Mount as a quick example, and you just don't see like these types of things really expressed in Christianity writ large. And that doesn't, I personally still am a Christian simply because it's all has to do with the way you experience it in some way, the way I've experienced life. And when I'm aligning myself with, when I'm living in a way that I find myself most whole and at peace, I can also relate that to Christianity as I've experienced it. And so, yeah, of course I'm using it for my own, but then you have a bunch of people who can say, well, because you're not getting on board with these tenets or this belief or that theology, therefore you're not a true Christian, which sure. Is anyone a true anything? Is like we're using is metaphor. It's all, I think that's all it is we're grafting towards metaphors that explain our feelings and our beliefs about how the world should work. I think that's all we're doing. Perhaps even the guy who wrote this article is trying to do that, but not quite so.
He seems like he does a lot of
honesty that you would
stuff.
expect from a PhD.
I've looked up a lot of his things, and just from like skimming through titles and stuff, so much of what he does appears to be apologetics, and that's like a focus of his. So
yeah, if you have a PhD in apologetics, I don't want to burst any bubbles out there, but that's not a real PhD.
He has a PhD of history and philosophy of science from the University of Notre Dame.
Oh,
and a master's in confessional Lutheran theology from Bethany Lutheran Theological Seminary.
So he doesn't have an excuse, is what you're saying.
And he's the director of apologetics and worldview studies at a Lutheran college.
I just don't trust people who are into apologetics.
No,
I don't trust.
It's just like school doesn't make you useful.
It comes down like so what? You change someone and they go, okay, I now believe that what you said is true. You're like, hey, you can't be saved. Nothing matters if you don't accept that Jesus died and rose again. And you go, okay, I believe that now. You're like, oh, good. Well, now we're good. Everything's fine now. Like it's this like that phony idea of like, you can just like flip that switch, believe the right thing. And now you're on like the straight and narrow is so goofy, which is why I find Christianity getting so hung up on a set of beliefs to be a distraction for the most part.
It's a lot to sort through.
You're nodding your head in weird ways, Jeremiah, and you have a smirk, so I can't tell where you...
Oh, no. I'm just taking it in. I'm just thinking like, I think it's telling that it's a career path. Apologetics is a career path that like only works if you have something to discuss in perpetuity. Like,
yeah, you have to find stuff to have a problem with constantly.
Right. And I'm looking at all this like books and papers and things, and I'm like, I guess that's all of it is just you're singling out things and going like, well, I have to have an opinion on this. I have to make this about Christianity or Christianity about this. Like,
or anytime someone feels like that, oh, I could never be a Christian because then all of a sudden they're like antennas perk up and they're like,
right. Which,
I have
to your point, that's a legitimate thing. But no one's saying that about the Crusades or the Inquisition. Like, we've been there. Like, slavery, yes, that would be one you could still have that argument about with like the modern church. But like, nobody was defending the Crusades. I didn't think. Apparently, there's like the apologetics group. What else is the apologists? Like, apologists?
Maybe people who are arguing with Christian apologists are bringing up the Crusades and the Inquisition a whole bunch.
Well,
maybe
that just sounds like
up with it.
A cycle of miserable people making each other miserable.
Oh, it does. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
What do you think this guy, a Christian apologist, what do you think he equates himself to? Do you think he thinks of himself as like the watcher on the wall, like protecting the flock? Or do you think he thinks of himself as like a crusader out conquering more ground for Christ?
Back to the word crusade. I like it.
Yeah. What is this guy to himself?
He's a I feel like he's just like a gatekeeper. Like, there's a lot of reasons that the world will throw at you to not believe. And I'll just boom, 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 shoot all those down. I don't know.
And you kids think gatekeeper is negative, but in this case, gatekeeper is a very important position.
Yeah, like a goalie. He's like a goalie. That's great. I like Christian goalie.
I feel like Crusades puck is going right through his legs.
Yeah. Excuse me. I don't know. I feel like I don't know any closing thoughts on this. I would like to point out something that just quickly when he talks about Christianity supports the proper administration of justice, which sometimes, but certainly not always, occurred during the Inquisition. I just kind of want to call out quickly that he's saying specifically that he believes the proper administration of justice is killing people for heresy.
Well, so, no, he gives himself the out. He gives himself the out of like, well, not everything was good, but won't specifically say like, hey, maybe it was okay within the church's teaching. Like, it was good to roll up and ask like, where are the heretics? And we need to make you, be re-educated or something. Like, he could say that was okay, but like not the torturing and the killing were obviously terrible. But he hand waves away with like, some things like torture happened and, that's bad, of course, but like won't just come out and go, this was a travesty. I also like this thing. Like, in order for him to like the whole thing, he feels like he has to excuse the whole thing.
The intent was kill heretics, and they did that. And he's like, well, sometimes justice is a bitch, I guess.
Hey, to their credit, they invented waterboarding.
No way. Good for them. That's pretty special.
Do you guys want to round out this discussion by talking about some of the many ways that people were tortured?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to close.
Which just so we're clear, wasn't good, right?
It all depends on where you're sitting, buddy.
Yeah,
okay,
some people deserved it.
All right.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Okay, so we already covered the Judas cradle, which is the pyramid-shaped chair.
That's wild.
Who names that?
The Judas chair, because you betrayed Christ and you have to sit in the chair of the Christ betrayer.
I feel like by definition, you're cradling the chair more than it's cradling you. You know what I mean?
The chair is cradling your asshole.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a chicken or the egg sort of thing. Okay, so waterboarding. Okay, it says the patient strangled and gasped and suffocated, and at intervals, the toga, which is referred to the piece of cloth that covered the victim's face. So that's the toga. The toga was withdrawn and was adjured to tell the truth. And he was adjured to tell the truth. The severity of the infliction was measured by the number of jars of water consumed, sometime reaching 6 or 8. So not fun, but you will stay hydrated.
I feel like the CIA isn't really even that creative. Like, with all the stuff they do, like, they're not even doing stuff as cool as medieval torture. CIA doesn't have a Judas cradle. They just lock you in a
just
tiny
worried
room
about
where you can't
war
stand
crimes and shit. Come on.
Yeah, they should have like Operation Paperclipped some of Saddam's kids. Get some new ideas out of the whole thing. There was
what else we got?
The Spanish donkey.
Again, wait, should we play a separate game called "Is it a sex act?"
You just gonna
torture device? The Judas cradle.
The Spanish donkey punch.
Spanish donkey.
Yeah, we should have done that, and then I should have had you guys like draw what you think it is, before that would be a fun like video stream.
A weird game of Pictionary.
So this was like it was like a wedge-shaped sawhorse type thing. It was basically a chair with no back on it that's long and skinny and triangular, and you would sit on it and straddle it. Sometimes it had spikes on it, and they would put like weights on your legs and stuff.
Oh my God. For the Lord. That's what I like, is this is all in the name of the Lord.
What did the people...
hey, look, are you a Jew or not?
What did the people who designed this stuff do in the space between the Dark Ages and like becoming airline seat designers? Like, where were these skills festering?
Daydream and jerk off. Probably kill some animals.
Yeah, definitely some animal cruelty in this mixed bag.
They drove an over the road truck and kept a prostitute in the back of it. Okay, so the strappado, it was a popular torture method during the Inquisition, primarily because it was easy to do. It involved tying a person's hands behind his or her back and suspending the person's full weight by the wrists using a pulley system. So basically, they'd like tie your hands behind you and then like...
Again, I think that literally is a sex thing. Like, I think that one actually works for both.
I just don't... You couldn't do that to me without just all of my bones breaking. I'm like the least flexible person there is.
They mastered it. I think that's what's so innovative about these torture devices is like they're not going to let you die by mistake. I mean, maybe at the start when they first start, with the prototypes, but that's not their intent.
Some say the church stifled innovation, but I say look at the strappado.
The strap-ono?
Yeah, more or less. Yes. Okay. The water cure. Okay, so let's see. Victims of the water cure were strapped down and had water funneled into their mouths, up to 30 pints in one sitting. The water cure was different from waterboarding in that the victim was actually imbibing all that water instead of having it poured over their face.
Oh, good. So they can get water poisoning. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's water poisoning.
I mean, I imagine you drown from that in a lot of situations. I guess they didn't always care to keep you alive.
Well, they're drinking it. They're not breathing it.
Oh.
You can still breathe through your nose.
Oh, my God. They're pouring it into their stomach.
Yeah, basically.
Oh.
30 pints, though. Like, stomachs hold like a couple pints.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Are you questioning their methods? Are you questioning the science here?
It's like those little bitty dudes that win hot dog eating contests.
Yeah, that stretching. They slowly stretch their stomachs.
And
they start with a pint. They go to a second pint.
A lot of times they'll dip them in water first.
Yeah.
The water. So does it say what it's curing? Or is like the cure in the name supposed to be like a dark joke from back then that we just don't get?
I think it cures Judaism.
It cures heresy. Oh, you're a heretic? Yeah. Let's cure you of that.
That's something I'm disappointed this article doesn't go into more detail about is what was heresy? What was the definition of heresy? Like, what types of heresy were there? Because there's lots of different inquisitions, so they had different rules, right? They weren't all lumped in as the same inquisition, so they had different things they must have that were considered heresy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine it's something along the lines of very basic and having it not accepting the quote unquote gospel. I don't know. Like, was that pre? Is Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior?
Maybe it was probably like even more basic. It's like, do you think that the earth is at the center of the universe?
Yeah.
The next one's the head crusher. It's basically what it sounds like. Is a big vice that they put your head into. It says it'd shatter your teeth and sometimes your eyeballs pop out.
Fuck that, dude. Can you imagine being the people like there's like a level. I feel like in history, we don't have the same level of resilience to death and torture that maybe we once did as a human, as a species. Like, I feel like not as a whole, like, armies and CIA, and you can train people to do this stuff, but usually that takes a long time, to get somebody to a point where they're comfortable with these kind of moves. I feel like given life expectancy, and maybe how you might get involved in this. It's just like, hey, do you need a job? And they're like, yeah, I'm pretty down on my luck. They're like, okay, you just need to crush this dude's head. And they're like, yeah, I guess that's fine. I mean, not exactly what I wanted, but it pays the bills. Like it seems like people did not feel as mortified by slow, painful death.
Take your family out there to watch someone be executed. Like that was good, wholesome entertainment.
Yeah, good Christian fun there.
And even with as like horrible as our reality TV competitions and how much like our whole society is based around like voyeuristically judging other people at the worst moments of their lives, but somehow still we don't televise executions, right? Like we still have that line of like, we'll let them beat each other in a cage for a sport, but like if someone dies, we're going to cut away because that's
and if someone dies, we're kind of lucky. Like there's like that,
right?
Like,
right, but like
kind of hoping a little bit.
Because if you had to watch like somebody actually be executed who's on death row, it's just going to be sad. Like modern people have more opportunities to be empathetic, I guess. Maybe we're slightly better as
maybe
a people.
If they choose to be executed, like that that dude who shot himself in the head at the trial. Did you ever see that video?
I don't think so.
I can never remember the guy's name. Never mind. That's a dark one. Don't Google it.
Yeah, I won't. I'm not interested. Any more torture devices before I roll out of here?
The knee splitter is basically a toothed vice.
I split your kneecap. They just shatter it.
They should like kind of crushed it in a vice with spikes on it. It said it rarely killed anybody, but it rendered the victim's legs useless, which more or less kills you in medieval Europe.
Yeah. I don't think the wheelchair was in great shape at that point.
Yeah, I don't feel like the village cripple ever rose to be like a position of power.
No.
No, they had the same attitude towards homeless people that we have now.
Yeah.
Oh, this one sounds fun. The Spanish tickler. And this looks like
this is definitely a sex move.
This looks like a paint roller on a long like when you're trying to paint something high up and you got the roller on the big long stick. Mm-hmm. It's basically that, but the roller has spikes on it, which you want to give these people credit for innovation, but they just keep going back to the spikes. Spikes and
like there's a lot of things that are like, just spikes on it, or it squeezes you. It squeezes a different body part. Like this is the thigh pincher.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, spikes. This is the Taco Bell of torture. It's like everything's the same ingredients, it's just a different shape.
Right. What if it was a bathtub, but with spikes? What if it was a bookcase that you were inside, but it had spikes? What if it was a chair, but it was a spike?
Yeah. Man, just one shape of spike will do, maybe two. This device was also called a cat's paw due to its shape and the fact that it ended in 4 or 5 curved metal claws. Sometimes the tickler would be at the end of a long pole to better reach the body of a victim suspended in the air.
Better reach all your crevices. Ooh.
Yeah, or tied to a vertical rack. They basically like paint roller you while you hang in the air, but with spikes. Burning at the stake, boring. Boring. And then the rack.
Never die. Oh, that's the stretcher one, right?
The rack, okay. Also called the Potro or Escalera, is one of the most widely known Escalera. The Buick Escalera is the new crossover of the season. Is also one of the most widely known torture methods used during the Spanish Inquisition. The victim was tied down to a plank of wood while a crank was turned, pulling all 4 limbs simultaneously away from the body.
Man.
I respect this one because at least there was some engineering involved. It's not just a paint roller with sticks on it,
Right. It's not just someone will stand here and smack you with this rope that's knotted up and we put a spike in it. Like,
here, sit on this point.
Yeah.
Great, genius. Like this one had to. There was some engineering involved. And
I like
they just tear you apart, like Hitcher style.
We can't just pull one arm off or like pull fingers off. Like we need to pull all 4 limbs out of your stumpy body.
Just to hear them they all pop out of their joints at the same time. Oh, you're just floppy and shit. You can't fucking move.
You got to pick one person in the entire world to go on the rack. Who you pick?
to death or just like we're only trying to get it like 2 inches
We
out.
don't have to kill him. We just have to make him pop a couple times.
When he's a little longer, he can come off. Anyone in the world currently living?
Yeah.
I feel like the easy answers are like just a dictator, like some terrible authoritarian dictator. Like, why not? But I think it's got to be a celebrity. I think
Diane Keaton.
Diane Keaton. Oh, wow. You really had that one loaded up. Why her?
I have a hatred for Diane Keaton.
Oh, if we're doing celebrity, I'm definitely going with...
I'll do Dr. Phil. I feel good about that.
Who's it? It's something in my mind. Who's the 30 Seconds to Mars guy?
Oh, Jared Leto?
Jared Leto. It's
yeah. All right,
absolutely Jared Leto.
Good. I'm glad we didn't waste our shots on like the Putins and the Kim Jong-uns of the world.
No, Jared Leto deserves it probably more than most.
Diane Keaton, I'd like to hear that story someday.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's a story. It's just like from a very early age, I just had a hatred for her. I think she sucks. Like pop her shoulders out of joint. Do you guys know about the boats? The boats, no. Like as a torture method. You ever heard of that?
Like being keel-hauled or something, or no, something different.
No. I forget what culture this was from, but they called it the boats, and they would basically they would put you in a boat, like a rowboat, right, and tie you up so that you couldn't move. So you're just kind of like strapped in there, all stretched out, and they would put a funnel in your mouth and they would fill you until you're about to burst and die, full of milk and honey.
Oh,
and
I don't like where this is going.
Oh yeah, they just pump you full of milk and honey.
Oh my god!
And when you can't take any, and then they'd smear it all over your chest and your your butthole and everything, and then just kind of push you out into the water, and you would just float there for days, diarrhea all over yourself, and insects would swarm you and
work their way into your butthole.
Exactly. And they'd lay eggs, and then you're just a maternity ward for flies and mosquitoes.
You get fucked by dolphins.
That is really creative.
That is.
Okay, it's worth mentioning during this whole time, they had ways of immediately killing people, right? They knew how to behead people. This wasn't about being efficient. This was about making it as horrible as possible.
I really want to know what culture.
I don't understand what goes into that. Why? Why do you want to do that? Why do you think I don't like this person? They definitely deserve to die, but it just doesn't seem right to make it quick and painless. How do we prolong this?
You gotta really hate them.
Days. Yeah, you have to have a lot of hate in your heart.
They have to reject your Christian principles or something. Okay, so Scaphism, also known as the boats, is an alleged ancient Persian method of execution mentioned by Plutarch in his Life of Artaxerxes. It is ostensibly entailed trapping the victim between two boats, feeding and covering them with milk and honey, and allowing them to fester and be devoured by insects and other vermin over time.
Ugh, I can believe the Persians would do that. That checks out.
Yeah, they did some shit.
The Persians, mixed bag.
Yeah, they're a real mixed bag over. The Assyrians?
The Assyrians, yeah, they went hard.
Oh, they went hard in the paint, dude.
There was some interesting Mongol sentences that were carried out. There was Jeremiah, you listened to the hardcore history about the Mongols, right?
I believe so, yeah.
At one point, I think they were in Russia, and they hogtied all these Russian POWs on the ground, and then they built this deck. It's this big wooden platform, set it on top of all of these Persian or Russian prisoners of war, and then ate a long lunch on top of them while they screamed and died.
Just the amount of work, we're going to stop the army here for a couple of days so we can build a deck to sit on top of these prisoners to slowly crush them underneath us. So much planning has to go into that, and everyone is just going along with it. Yeah, I mean, they're prisoners.
That's hilarious. Oh my God, that's such a funny idea.
Yeah, we're going to crush them one at a time. What do you want us to do?
Well, that's the thing is Kublai Khan wasn't punching the clock. He had a passion for what he did.
Kublai Khan.
He found what he loved, and he never wanted to work a day in his life.
And you know what, you people listening, you think you're different species of human than Kublai Khan and people strapping people to boats with full of milk. You're not. You're the same.
The exact same. I think I mean, when you do look at these things, it does look like maybe the arc of humanity is improving, based on whatever reason you've decided is the moral impetus for it. But it's like, we're not really doing that in the same capacity anymore. Of course, it's still happening, but not in the same capacity. So I think I just want to stop for a moment, and that's my praise. That's my praise request.
There's ups and downs, but maybe, the ups get a little bit higher each time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Bring it back.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Restore past generations. That's what I want. I'm sharpening my battle axe. I'm ready to go out there and build a deck on somebody.
Well,
I hope this has been an informative episode, and I hope that you can rest assured that Inquisition bad, Crusades bad, science good.
Science is good.
I think
stifling science is bad.
You think you've got a new recurring podcast segment of blank, or is it a sex thing? Because like this time it was medieval torture devices, or it could be church signs, or a sex thing.
Yeah,
I like it.
We need listener submissions. That's a lot easier when you have listeners submit questions.
Like you should be in the Growing Up Christian Discord, where there are channels dedicated to sharing your best terrible Christian memes.
Yeah, that's what I should. We'll make a channel for games. We'll make a channel for games, and maybe people can submit ones, and we can subject our guests to them. We used to do that a while ago. I came up with some pretty fun ones earlier in the early days. Whether it was
8 months
worship
ago.
lyrics, yeah.
Before we started phoning it in and critiquing articles from the print PDF of the Lutheran Sentinel.
Yeah.
I guess that probably ought to be said at some point. This doesn't look like it's a big publication. It just was one of those things that like caught everybody's eye.
Your grandma read it.
And it is it is like a microcosm for some more frequent justifications of awful things in history's past.
But it's not like this is like a giant mainstream like article that's gotten a lot of traction or anything. For all we know, 15 people read this. Well,
we'll just wait for the Christianity Today or Gospel Coalition article to come out where they talk about how the Crusades weren't all bad.
It'll be their next Christianity Today like investigative podcast series. They did the one on Mars Hill, and that'll be about the Crusades.
Yeah,
just covering the
I think they have to do one first about all the about the cover-ups of the sexual exploitation and harassment in the workplace that have recently come out of there. That's not going
Christianity
great
Today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not. I guess it's not the right time to get into that. But it's
sounds pretty bad.
That'll be old news. That'll be older news by the time this one comes out, actually. But yeah, they apparently had culture there, and it was reported on from someone who is part of the organization. And I don't know. I don't know a lot of the details. I haven't looked into it a lot. I've just been seeing it posted a lot. It's fucking.
Well, I enjoyed the Mars Hill podcast. I don't know if this is a bad time to say that, but I thought it was pretty good.
How dare you? You can't say that.
All right, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you're not in the Discord, join the Discord. What are you doing? You can maybe find a link on our social media. We'll make sure that the link is current by the time this one comes back.
Yeah, I'll fix it.
Yeah, appreciate you listening. And thanks to our sponsor, Minor Threads. Go to minorthreadsco.com if you're in the market for merchandise or printing or just general apparel and stickers and all that kind of stuff. And those guys will hook you up. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.